When I got home that Tuesday evening, my neighbor Mrs. Kellerman was standing at the edge of my driveway with her arms crossed like she'd been waiting for me. "Your grandkids are loud at night," she yelled, loud enough for the whole street to hear. I climbed out of my truck slowly, feeling every one of my 56 years in my knees. 10 hours of laying hardwood floors in a McMansion across town had left me ready for a hot shower and a cold beer, not whatever this was. "What?" I said. "Your grandkids," she repeated, jabbing a finger toward my house. "They cry every night. All night. It's 2 a.m. sometimes, Daniel. I can't sleep." I stared at her. "Mrs. Kellerman, I don't have any grandkids." She blinked at me like I'd just told her the sky was green. "Don't lie to me. I've seen your daughter carrying them. 2 of them. Every single night this week." Something cold slid down my spine. "Carrying what?" "The babies," she said, exasperated. 2 babies. I see her going in and out with them, swaddled up, and they cry all night long." I looked past her at my house. It was a nice place, a 2-story craftsman I'd renovated myself over the years. Dark windows stared back at me. My daughter Maren's car was parked in the driveway next to where I'd just pulled in. She'd been staying with me for 3 months now, ever since she and her husband Tyler decided they needed to save money while they figured things out. Translation: they were broke, and I was the only one stupid enough to let them move in rent-free. "Mrs. Kellerman," I said carefully, "Maren doesn't have kids. She's not pregnant. There are no babies." The old woman's face twisted with frustration. "Then what do I keep seeing? What do I keep hearing? You think I'm making this up?" "I don't think you're making anything up," I said, though part of me wondered if she'd finally gone senile. "But there's got to be some explanation." "Then you explain it," she snapped, "because I'm about ready to call the cops about the noise." She stormed off before I could respond, leaving me standing in my own driveway feeling like I just stepped into someone else's life. I grabbed my tool belt from the truck bed and headed inside, my mind spinning. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet, actually. Usually Maren had music playing or was on her phone talking to someone. I found her in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with her phone in her hand. She looked up when I walked in, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or guilt. "Hey, Dad," she said too brightly. "Didn't hear you come in." "Just got here." I set my tool belt on the kitchen table. Mrs. Kellerman ambushed me in the driveway. Maren's expression didn't change, but her grip on her phone tightened just slightly. "Oh yeah? What did she want?" "She says your babies keep her up at night." Now Maren laughed, but it sounded forced. "What babies?" That's what I said. I opened the fridge and grabbed a beer, studying her over the door. "She says she sees you carrying them every night, says they cry constantly." "She's losing it," Maren said flatly. "You know how old people get?" She seemed pretty certain. "Well, she's wrong." Maren pushed off the counter. "I'm going upstairs. Tyler and I have plans tonight." She left before I could ask what kind of plans. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of her bedroom door closing. I stood in my kitchen, drinking my beer, feeling like I'd just been brushed off by my own daughter in my own house. If I ever become senile, I thought, please let it start with something cooler than phantom babies. I finished the beer and headed upstairs for that shower. My bedroom was at the end of the hall, past Maren and Tyler's room. As I walked by their door, I heard voices inside. Low, urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. They were arguing about something. I kept walking. Not my business, I told myself. They were adults. They could handle their own problems. But that night, after I'd showered and crawled into bed, I lay awake listening. The house was old, and sound carried in weird ways. I heard Maren and Tyler moving around downstairs, heard the back door open and close, heard footsteps on the porch, then coming back inside. And then, around midnight, I heard it. A baby crying. Not a real baby, though. It sounded off somehow. Too perfect, too rhythmic, like a recording played on a loop. It went on for maybe 5 minutes, then stopped abruptly. Then started again, then stopped. I got out of bed and crept to my door, opening it just a crack. The crying was coming from somewhere downstairs. I moved into the hallway, avoiding the spots where the floorboards creaked, and made it to the top of the stairs. The lights were off down there, but I could see movement in the living room, shadows shifting. I heard Maren's voice, though I couldn't make out what she was saying. Then Tyler's deeper voice responding. Then I saw her, Maren, carrying something across the living room, something wrapped in blankets, roughly the size and shape of an infant. She moved quickly, almost furtively, disappearing into the spare room off the kitchen, the one I'd been using for storage. The crying stopped. I stood at the top of the stairs for a long time, my heart pounding harder than it should have been. There was no baby. There couldn't be. So what the hell was my daughter carrying around my house at midnight? I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. The next morning, I waited until Maren and Tyler left. They took off around 9, saying something about meetings and errands. As soon as their car pulled out of the driveway, I went downstairs and headed straight for the spare room. The door was locked. I stared at the knob, feeling a fresh wave of cold anger wash over me. This was my house, my room, and my daughter had locked me out of it. I went to the garage and got my tools. It took me about 30 seconds to pop the lock. The door swung open, and I stepped inside. The room had been transformed. All my boxes and old furniture had been shoved into one corner. In their place, someone had set up what looked like a photography studio. Ring lights stood in the corners. A tripod held a professional camera. And on the floor, arranged carefully on a blanket, were 2 realistic baby dolls. Not real babies. Dolls. Expensive ones, the kind they use in movies. They looked disturbingly lifelike, with detailed faces and soft bodies. One was wrapped in a blue blanket, the other in pink. I stood there for a long time, just staring at them. Then I noticed the speaker system set up on the shelf. Small, wireless, the kind you could control from your phone. I picked up one of the dolls and turned it over. There was a tag sewn into the blanket. Real-life baby props. Professional grade. Professional grade. For what? I set the doll down and looked around the room more carefully. There were props everywhere. Bottles, pacifiers, tiny clothes, a changing table that looked brand new. Everything you'd need to make it look like you were taking care of real babies. But why? I heard a car door slam outside. They were back. I moved fast, shoving the doll back where I'd found it and hurrying out of the room. I pulled the door shut and rushed upstairs, making it to my bedroom just as the front door opened downstairs. "Dad?" Maren called out. "You home?" I stayed quiet, my heart hammering. After a moment, I heard her footsteps moving through the house. She went into the spare room. I heard her voice, sharp with alarm. "Tyler, the door's unlocked." More footsteps. Tyler's voice, angry. "Did he go in there?" "I don't know. Everything looks the same. We need to be more careful." "I know. If he finds out..." "He won't. He's too stupid to figure it out." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Too stupid to figure it out. My own daughter, talking about me like I was some kind of senile old man she had to manage. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands clenched into fists, and realized something important. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. Because I didn't know what they were doing, and I couldn't fight what I didn't understand. No, I was going to figure this out first. I was going to watch and wait and learn exactly what my daughter and her husband were up to in my house, and then I was going to deal with it. As the story unfolds, hit the hype button, like, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive them or walk away? I spent the rest of that day pretending everything was normal. I made myself a sandwich for lunch, watched some TV, did some paperwork for my contracting business. All the while, I could feel Maren watching me, studying me like she was trying to figure out if I knew anything. I kept my face neutral. Gave her nothing. Around 4 in the afternoon, I announced I had a job starting early the next morning, about 2 hours away. Said I'd probably stay overnight at a motel rather than make the drive twice. Maren's whole face lit up. "Oh, okay," she said, trying to sound casual. "That's fine. We'll hold down the fort here." "I'm sure you will," I said. I packed a bag that evening, making a show of it. Threw some clothes in my duffel, grabbed my toiletries from the bathroom. Tyler watched me from the couch, smirking like he'd just won something. "Have a good trip, Dan," he said. He never called me Daniel, always Dan, like we were buddies. "Don't work too hard." "Never do," I replied. I left around 7, waving from my truck as I backed out of the driveway. Maren and Tyler stood on the porch, waving back. The perfect picture of a loving family. I drove exactly 3 blocks, then pulled into the parking lot of the abandoned grocery store on Main Street. My plan was simple. I'd wait an hour, then sneak back to the house. There was a window in the garage that didn't lock properly. I'd been meaning to fix it for months. I could slip in that way, make my way up to the attic through the pull-down stairs in the garage, and watch whatever Maren and Tyler were doing from above. The attic ran the length of the house, and there were gaps between the floorboards in a few places where you could see down into the rooms below. I'd discovered them when I was running new electrical lines last year. I'd planned to seal them up eventually, but right now I was grateful I hadn't. The hour crawled by. I sat in my truck, feeling like an idiot, like some paranoid old man spying on his own family. But every time I thought about turning the truck back on and actually going to that motel, I remembered Maren's voice. He's too stupid to figure it out. At 8 o'clock, I started the truck and drove back home, but I circled around to the alley behind my house. The garage backed up to the alley, and there was no streetlight nearby. I could slip in without anyone seeing me from the house. The window slid open with barely a sound. I pulled myself through, grateful for all those years of construction work that kept me reasonably fit. My knees complained, but they did their job. I landed on the concrete floor of the garage as quietly as I could. The pull-down attic stairs were in the back corner. I lowered them slowly, wincing at every small creak. Then I climbed up into the darkness, pulling the stairs up behind me. The attic was hot and dusty and pitch black. I stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, then pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I kept it pointed at the floor as I made my way across the rafters to the section above the spare room. There. One of the gaps between the floorboards, about 6 inches long and half an inch wide. Plenty big enough to see through. The spare room was empty, the lights were off. I could see the 2 fake babies still lying on their blanket, illuminated by the streetlight coming through the window. I settled in to wait, ignoring the insulation itching against my arms, the heat making sweat run down my back. This was crazy. This was absolutely insane. But I was committed now. Around 9:30, I heard the front door open downstairs. Voices filtered up through the house. Not just Maren and Tyler, other people. I shifted position slightly, trying to get a better angle on the living room. I could see shadows moving around down there, but I couldn't make out faces or count how many people there were. Then I heard Maren's voice, loud and bright. "Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. This is going to be our biggest shoot yet." "Shoot? What kind of shoot?" More voices, laughing and chatting. Someone said something about authentic content and engagement numbers. Someone else mentioned the baby angle is genius. I pressed my eye harder against the gap, frustrated that I couldn't see more. The voices moved through the house. I heard footsteps in the spare room directly below me, Maren's voice. "Okay, so we'll set up here. Tyler, can you grab the bottles from the kitchen? Make sure they look full." Tyler's voice. "Got it. You want the blue blanket or the pink one first?" "Pink. Test the crying sound too. It needs to loop naturally." What the hell? I watched as people moved in and out of the spare room. Someone adjusted the ring lights. Someone else messed with the camera. And then Maren walked in carrying one of the fake babies, cradling it against her chest like it was real. She stood in front of the camera, her whole face transformed into an expression of exhausted maternal love. When she spoke, her voice had changed too, softer, more vulnerable. "It's 3 a.m, she said to the camera, and little Emma just won't settle. Being a mom is the hardest thing I've ever done, but when I look at this face, it's all worth it." She gazed down at the fake baby with so much false emotion that I felt sick. Someone said, "That's perfect, keep going." Maren continued, "A lot of you have asked how Tyler and I manage living with my dad while raising twins. Honestly, it's not easy. He doesn't really understand how much work babies are. Sometimes I feel like I'm parenting 3 children instead of 2. Laughter from the people off camera. Tyler's voice. "Hey now." Maren smiled. "But we make it work. Family is family, right? Even when they're challenging." More laughter. Someone said, "God, your dad really doesn't know you're filming this." "No clue," Tyler said. "The old man goes to bed at 9 and doesn't wake up till 6. We've got the whole night to shoot." "What if he finds out?" a woman's voice asked. Maren's fake sweet expression vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "He won't. And even if he did, what's he going to do? It's not like we're breaking any laws. We're just making content." "Using his house," the woman pointed out. "He's lucky we're paying the electric bill with how much these lights cost to run," Tyler said. "Besides, we won't be here much longer anyway." That got my attention. I shifted slightly, trying to get a better angle. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Maren and Tyler exchanged a look. Then Maren said, "We're working on some things, legal things, with the house." "You're not," the woman said, sounding shocked and delighted. "Are you trying to take it from him?" "We're not taking anything," Tyler said, but he was grinning. "We're just making sure that when the time comes, things go smoothly. Dan's not getting any younger. Someone needs to make sure his assets are properly managed." Assets. He was calling my house my assets. My hands clenched into fists. The insulation beneath my palms compressed. I felt a small shift in the beam I was lying on. "You guys are savage," someone said, laughing. "I love it." "We do what we have to do," Maren said. She lifted the fake baby again. "Okay, let's get a few more takes. I want to try some different angles." They kept filming for another hour. I watched them stage scene after scene, creating fake content for what I now understood was some kind of social media presence. Maren playing the exhausted but devoted mother, Tyler playing the supportive husband, both of them using my house as their studio, my electricity for their equipment, my home as the backdrop for their lies. And all the while, they talked about me like I was an obstacle to work around, a problem to solve, something to manage until they could push me out entirely. Around 11, people started leaving. I heard cars starting up outside, doors closing. The house got quieter. I should have left then, should have climbed back down and slipped out the way I came. But I didn't. I stayed there, frozen with rage, listening as Maren and Tyler cleaned up the spare room. That was good content, Tyler said. The twin angle is really resonating with people. Comments are already blowing up. We need to be careful, Maren said. Some of the neighbors are getting suspicious. That old bat next door cornered Dad yesterday. What did she say? Something about hearing babies crying at night. Dad didn't believe her, obviously, but we need to keep the sound lower. Or we just keep the dad out of the house more often, Tyler suggested. Maybe we convince him to take more overnight jobs, or better yet, he stopped. I heard footsteps below me, moving through the house. They were coming toward the stairs that led up to the second floor, the stairs that were directly below another one of those gaps in the attic floor. I shifted position to look down through that gap instead, and that's when the beam beneath me creaked. Loud. A long, groaning sound that echoed through the quiet house. Everything went silent below me. Then Tyler's voice, sharp. What was that? Upstairs, Maren said. The attic. There's nothing in the attic. Maybe an animal got in. Or maybe, Tyler said slowly, your dad didn't actually leave town. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. I stayed absolutely still, barely breathing, as footsteps moved below me. Someone was climbing the stairs to the second floor. Should we check? Maren asked. If he's up there, we need to know, Tyler replied. I heard the sound of the hallway closet opening, the one where we kept the pull-down attic stairs. My mind raced. There was no way out. If they came up here, they'd find me. And then what? But Tyler didn't pull down the stairs. Instead, I heard him walk back toward Maren. It's probably nothing. Old houses make noise. You sure? Even if it is him, what's he going to do? He didn't see anything. He doesn't know anything. He's not as stupid as you think, Maren said quietly. Sure he is. He's a hammer swinger, babe. Manual labor. No imagination. He'll never figure this out. They moved away, back downstairs. I heard them talking in lower voices, then the sound of the TV turning on. They were settling in for the night, probably thinking they were safe. I lay in the attic for another 2 hours, waiting until I was absolutely certain they'd gone to bed. Around 1 a.m, the house finally went quiet. I gave it another 30 minutes, then carefully made my way back across the attic to the garage stairs. Every movement felt too loud. Every creak of wood felt like a gunshot in the silence. But I made it. I lowered the stairs inch by inch, climbed down, pushed them back up. Then I slipped out the garage window and into the alley. I walked the 3 blocks back to my truck, my mind spinning with everything I'd seen and heard. My daughter was creating fake content using fake babies and my house. She and her husband were planning to take my property somehow. They thought I was stupid, useless, beneath them. I sat in the truck for a long time, just staring at the dashboard. Then I started the engine and drove to an actual motel. I needed time to think, time to figure out what the hell I was going to do about this. Because one thing was very clear. Maren and Tyler had made a serious mistake. They'd underestimated their mark. Maren spent 3 days in jail before Tyler's parents bailed them both out. Paul called to tell me, and I heard the apology in his voice, even though he didn't say it. They're out on conditions, he said. They can't contact you, can't come within 500 feet of your property, and they have to surrender their passports. Good. There's something else. Tyler's parents hired a defense attorney. Good one. He's already talking about making this go away. What do you mean? Plea deal. They admit to lesser charges, get probation, community service, no jail time. No. Dan? I said no. I want them to face real consequences. Paul sighed. The DA might not give you that choice. They're not going to want to spend the time and money on a trial if they can get a guilty plea. Then I'll make sure they have to. I'll go public. I'll show everyone what they did. That could backfire. Make you look vindictive. I don't care how I look. I care about justice. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about what justice actually meant in this situation. Prison time, public humiliation, financial ruin, all of the above. I opened my laptop and looked at Maren's social media accounts again. She hadn't posted since the arrest, but her followers didn't know why. The comments on her last post were full of concern. Where are you? Haven't heard from you in days. Hope everything's okay with the twins. Miss your content. Please post soon. They had no idea that the twins were fake, that Maren was a liar, that everything they'd been following and supporting was a carefully constructed fraud. I could tell them. I could expose everything right now, destroy her online presence before the trial even started. But something stopped me, some last shred of fatherly instinct that said maybe I should give her a chance to confess first, to own what she'd done publicly before I did it for her. I gave her a week. During that week, I started putting my house back together. I changed all the locks. I cleaned out the spare room, removing every trace of their fake studio. I repainted the walls. I fixed the jimmied lock on my office door. I erased them from my home, one room at a time. On the 8th day, Maren posted on social media. I saw it that evening, sitting in my living room with a beer. Paul had warned me it was coming. Apparently her lawyer had advised her to get ahead of the story. The post was a photo of Maren, makeup-free, looking exhausted and vulnerable. The caption read, "I need to be honest with you all. I've made some serious mistakes. The babies you've seen in my content aren't real. I've been struggling with infertility for years, and instead of being honest about it, I created a fantasy life. I'm so sorry to everyone I've misled. I'm taking time away to work on myself and my marriage. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time." She'd made it about her pain, her struggles. She was positioning herself as a victim of her own desperation, someone to be pitied rather than condemned. And she hadn't mentioned me at all, hadn't mentioned trying to steal my house, forge my signature, or destroy my life. The comments were already pouring in, most of them sympathetic. We all make mistakes. Sending love. Infertility is so hard. Be gentle with yourself. Thank you for your honesty. Wishing you healing. They were buying it, every word. I called Paul. You saw the post? He asked. Yeah. She's trying to control the narrative, get sympathy before the charges become public. It's working. Everyone's feeling sorry for her. Not for long. The arraignment is tomorrow. It'll be in the court records, and eventually someone will connect the dots. Eventually isn't good enough. Dan, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to stop waiting for justice and start taking it. I hung up before he could argue. Then I did something I'd been planning for days, but hoping I wouldn't have to do. I created my own social media account. Used a photo of myself from 10 years ago, when I looked a little younger and less worn down by life. Set up a simple profile. Father, carpenter, truth teller. And then I posted. I didn't share everything, not yet. Just enough to start people asking questions. My name is Daniel Rourke. Some of you might follow my daughter's account about her life as a mother of twins. I need you to know that those babies aren't real, and neither is most of what she's posted. But the fake babies are just the start. Stay tuned? I added a photo, one I'd taken from the hidden camera. It showed Maren holding one of the fake dolls, clearly visible as a prop, while Tyler adjusted a ring light. The staging was obvious. I posted it. Within an hour, I had 200 followers. Within 2 hours, 1,000. People started commenting, asking questions, demanding more information. The trial was set for 6 weeks out. Paul warned me it would be intense, that Tyler's expensive defense attorney would try to paint me as a vengeful father, persecuting his daughter over a misunderstanding. "They're going to make you the bad guy," he said over coffee at our usual diner. "They'll say you misinterpreted harmless content creation as malicious fraud. They'll claim the forged signatures were just rough drafts they never intended to file." But they did file them. We caught them in the act. Attempted filing. The documents never went through. A good lawyer can spin that as cold feet, last-minute conscience, anything but criminal intent. That's garbage. That's the legal system. Paul stirred his coffee. The DA is still pushing for a plea deal. If they plead guilty to lesser charges, this could be over next week. I don't want it over. I want everyone to know what they did. Paul studied me. This isn't about justice anymore, is it? It's about revenge. Maybe. Is that so wrong? No, but you need to be honest with yourself about what you're doing, because revenge has a cost, Dan. Always. I knew he was right, but I didn't care. Maren and Tyler had tried to take everything from me. Now I was going to return the favor. That night, I went through my recordings again. Hours of audio and video that I'd collected. Most of it had gone to the police, but I'd kept copies of everything. I listened to them mock me, laugh about how easy it was to manipulate me, plan my removal from my own house. And I realized Paul was wrong about one thing. This wasn't just revenge. It was self-defense. Because people like Maren and Tyler didn't stop after one attempt. If I let them off easy now, they'd try again. Maybe not immediately, maybe not the same scam, but they'd find another angle, another weakness to exploit. The only way to truly protect myself was to make sure they understood, deep in their bones that I wasn't prey. I was a predator, and they'd just made a fatal mistake. Over the next few weeks, I did my homework. I researched Tyler's background, his failed businesses, his debts. I found out he'd been sued twice for not paying contractors, that he'd bounced rent checks at 3 different apartments before moving in with me. I researched Maren's social media empire more thoroughly. Found out she'd been buying followers, faking engagement metrics, lying about her earnings to attract sponsors. The whole thing was a house of cards. And I compiled all of it into a detailed dossier that I gave to Paul, who passed it to the DA. "This is good work," the DA told me when we met at her office. Her name was Rebecca Torres, a sharp woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Some of this we can use at trial. Some of it's just character evidence, but it helps build a picture." "They're con artists," I said. "This wasn't their first scam, and it wouldn't have been their last." "I believe you, and we're going to make sure the jury believes it too." She leaned back in her chair. "But I need to ask you something, Mr. Rourke. What's your end game here? What do you want to see happen?" "I want them convicted." "And then what? Maximum sentence? Restitution? Public humiliation?" "All of it." She nodded slowly. "I can work with that, but you need to be prepared for what comes next. They're going to paint you as the villain. They're going to drag your name through the mud. Are you ready for that?" "I am." "Good, because it's about to get ugly." She was right. 3 weeks before the trial, Tyler's lawyer filed a motion claiming I'd illegally recorded Maren and Tyler without their consent, that the video and audio evidence should be thrown out because I'd violated their privacy. Paul called me immediately. "They're trying to suppress the recordings." "Can they do that?"
Maybe. New York is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, which means you can record conversations you're part of. But you weren't in the room for most of these recordings. That's where it gets complicated.
"So we might lose the evidence?"
We might.
"The judge will decide at a hearing next week." The hearing was tense. Tyler's lawyer, a slick guy named Morrison who wore suits that cost more than my truck, argued that I'd violated his client's reasonable expectation of privacy by recording them in my own home. Mr. Rourke installed hidden cameras and audio devices without their knowledge or consent, Morrison said. He conducted surveillance that would make the NSA blush. This is a clear violation of their Fourth Amendment rights. Rebecca Torres countered immediately. Mr. Rourke was protecting his property from suspected criminal activity. He had every right to install security measures in his own home. The defendants were guests with no expectation of privacy in areas where they were planning crimes. The judge, an older man named Patterson, listened to both sides, then asked me directly, "Mr. Rourke, when did you install these recording devices?" "After I discovered suspicious activity in my home, Your Honor." "What kind of suspicious activity?" "I found fake babies, professional camera equipment, and evidence that my daughter and her husband were using my home for purposes I hadn't consented to. I also discovered that someone had broken into my office and gone through my personal documents." "And you believed they were planning to commit a crime?" "Yes, Your Honor. I believed they were planning to steal my property." Judge Patterson nodded. "The motion to suppress is denied. Mr. Rourke had a reasonable basis to believe criminal activity was occurring in his home. The recordings are admissible." Morrison's face went red, but he stayed professional. "Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance to review our strategy in light of this ruling." "Denied. Trial proceeds as scheduled. Anything else?" "No, Your Honor." As we left the courthouse, Paul grabbed my arm. "That was a big win. Without those recordings, we'd have a much weaker case." "Good. But Dan, I need to warn you, they're going to come at you hard at trial. They've got nothing to lose now." "Let them come." 2 weeks before trial, something unexpected happened. Tyler's parents showed up at my house. I was in the garage when they knocked. Through the window, I saw them standing on my porch. Tyler's father, Richard, was a big man who'd made his money in real estate. His mother, Patricia, was small and elegant and looked like she'd never had a hard day in her life. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mr. Rourke," Richard said when I opened the door, "thank you for seeing us." "I haven't agreed to anything. What do you want?" "To talk. Just talk. Please." Against my better judgment, I let them in. We sat in my living room, them on the couch, me in my chair, the chair I'd been sitting in when I found out my daughter was betraying me. "We know what Tyler and Maren did was wrong," Patricia started. "We're not here to defend that." "Then why are you here?" Richard leaned forward. "We're here to ask you to drop the charges." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You're joking." "We're not. Mr. Rourke, Tyler is our son. We know he's made mistakes, but he doesn't deserve to go to prison. And Maren, she's a victim in this too. Tyler pressured her, manipulated her. That's not what the recordings show. The recordings show two desperate people making terrible decisions, Patricia said, but they are not criminals. They're just lost. They tried to steal my house. And they failed, Richard said. No actual harm was done. You still own your property. Your credit is intact. Nothing was taken from you. Except my daughter. That stopped them both. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Richard said, "We're prepared to make this right, financially. We'll pay you for your trouble, compensate you for any expenses. Name your price." "You think you can buy me off?" "We think everyone has a price, Mr. Rourke, and frankly, dragging this through trial is going to cost you. Legal fees, lost work, the emotional toll. Why not let us make you whole and move on with your life?" I stood up. "Get out of my house." "Mr. Rourke, get out, now, before I call the police and report you for witness tampering." They left, but not before Richard turned back at the door. "This is going to destroy your daughter's life. Is that really what you want?" "She destroyed her own life when she decided to betray me. I'm just making sure she understands the consequences." After they left, I called Paul and told him what happened. "They're getting desperate," he said. "That's good for us. Means they know they're going to lose. Unless they try something else." "Like what?" "I don't know. But people with money and desperation do stupid things." I spent the next week being extra careful. I varied my routes to and from work. I checked my truck for tampering every morning. I installed better locks on my doors and windows. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then again, I'd learned the hard way that paranoia sometimes wasn't paranoid enough. 1 week before trial, Maren's lawyer filed one last motion, this time asking the judge to allow Maren to represent herself at trial. "It's a disaster waiting to happen," Paul explained. "She's going to testify, implicate herself, probably have a breakdown on the stand. Her lawyer probably advised against it, but she's doing it anyway." "Why?" "My guess. She thinks if she faces you directly, she can manipulate you, get you to soften, maybe convince you to ask the DA for leniency. It's a Hail Mary. It won't work." "I know, but it's going to be painful to watch. She's still your daughter, Dan." "No," I said. "She's not. Not anymore." The night before the trial, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through everything that was about to happen. The testimony, the evidence, the cross-examination. I thought about Maren when she was little, how she used to help me in the workshop, holding tools and asking a million questions, how proud I'd been at her high school graduation, even though her mother wasn't there to see it, how much I'd loved her. And I wondered when that love had died. My phone buzzed with a text from Paul. "Ready for tomorrow?" I texted back. "Ready as I'll ever be." Remember, stay calm on the stand. Don't let them bait you into anger. You're the victim here. Act like it. I'm not a victim anymore. For the purposes of this trial, you are. Play the part. I turned off my phone and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that courtroom and face my daughter. I'd tell my story, show my evidence, and watch as the jury decided her fate. And when it was over, when she was convicted and sentenced and taken away, I'd finally be free of her. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Because deep down, in a place I didn't want to look at too closely, I knew the truth. I'd never be free of her. She'd always be my daughter, no matter what she'd done. And this trial, this public destruction of her life, would haunt me for the rest of mine. But I was going to do it anyway, because sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to hurt the people you love. And I'd learned that lesson the hard way. The courtroom was packed when I arrived. News of the trial had spread through the community, and apparently half the town wanted to watch. I recognized some of Maren's social media followers in the gallery, young women with phones in their hands, probably live tweeting the proceedings. Paul met me at the prosecutor's table. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." Rebecca Torres was already there, organizing her files. She looked up when I sat down. "Mr. Rourke, how are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to watch my daughter go to prison." "You're doing the right thing. Remember that." The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood as Judge Patterson entered. He looked even more severe than he had at the pretrial hearings, his face set in hard lines. Then they brought in Maren and Tyler. Tyler looked the same as always, confident, almost cocky, despite the situation. He wore a nice suit and smiled at his parents in the front row. But Maren looked terrible. She'd lost weight, her face was hollow, and she wore an ill-fitting dress that made her look like a child playing dress-up. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. I looked away. Jury selection took most of the morning. Lawyers on both sides questioned potential jurors, trying to find people who could be impartial despite the sensational nature of the case. By lunch, they had their 12 jurors and 2 alternates. The trial itself started that afternoon. Rebecca Torres gave her opening statement first. She was good, building a narrative that painted Maren and Tyler as calculating con artists who'd targeted me specifically because they knew I'd trust them. This isn't a story about a family misunderstanding, she told the jury. This is a story about betrayal, about 2 people who saw an opportunity to steal everything from someone who loved them and who almost succeeded. The evidence will show that the defendants planned this crime for months. They moved into Daniel Rourke's home under false pretenses. They used his house, his utilities, his trust. They created an elaborate online presence built on lies. And when that wasn't enough, they attempted to forge his signature and steal his property. This is fraud. This is theft, and the law says it must be punished. Then Morrison stood up for Tyler's defense. He took a different approach. Painted Tyler as a young man who'd made mistakes, but who'd never intended any real harm. Said Tyler had been influenced by financial desperation and his wife's mental health struggles. That the whole thing had been a misguided attempt to create content, not a criminal conspiracy. My client made errors in judgment, Morrison said. He should have asked permission to use Mr. Rourke's home for filming. He should have been more transparent about his financial situation. But he's not a criminal. He's a young man who got in over his head and made some very poor choices. Choices he deeply regrets. Finally, Maren stood up to give her own opening statement. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked surprised. Maren's public defender, who was sitting at the table looking miserable, had clearly advised against this. Maren walked to stand in front of the jury box. She looked directly at them, her eyes red but determined. "I know what you've heard," she said, her voice shaking. "You've heard that I'm a liar, a con artist, someone who tried to steal from her own father. And some of that is true. I did create fake content. I did use my father's house without really asking permission. I did sign documents I shouldn't have signed." She paused, taking a breath. "But I need you to understand why. I need you to know what it's like to feel like you're drowning, to have debt collectors calling every day, to watch your husband's business fail, to want children so badly that you can't breathe, but your body won't cooperate, to feel like you're failing at everything." Some of the jurors looked sympathetic. Others looked skeptical. "I didn't set out to hurt my father," Maren continued. "I love him. I've always loved him. But I was desperate. And desperation makes you do things you never thought you'd do. Tyler and I thought if we could just get ahead of our debts, if we could just catch a break, everything would be okay. We convinced ourselves that using Dad's house for content wasn't really hurting anyone, that refinancing it wouldn't actually affect him because we'd make the payments. We convinced ourselves of a lot of things that weren't true." She turned to look at me directly. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I know you probably can't forgive me, and I don't blame you, but I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I was betraying you, even when I was lying, I loved you, and I always will." Some people in the gallery were crying. Even some of the jurors looked moved. I felt nothing. Rebecca Torres stood up for rebuttal, but Judge Patterson waved her down. "Save it for closing arguments, counsel. Let's proceed with the evidence." The prosecution called their first witness, the county clerk who'd been working the day Maren and Tyler tried to file the forged documents. She testified that Tyler had approached her counter with a folder of paperwork, that he'd been nervous but tried to act confident, that she'd started processing the documents when her supervisor, who'd been alerted by the police, had asked to see them. "What happened then?" Rebecca asked. "My supervisor looked at the documents and immediately called security. Mr. Grant tried to leave, but the officers were already there." "And what happened to Ms. Rourke?" "She was standing by the door. When she saw the officers, she tried to run, but they stopped her." Next came the handwriting expert who'd analyzed the forged signatures. She testified that the signatures on the documents were traced from real signatures, but with slight variations to make them look natural. "In your expert opinion, are these authentic signatures?" "No, they're forgeries. Very good forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless." The testimony went on all day. The police officers who'd made the arrest. The bank manager who testified about the equity in my house that Maren and Tyler had been trying to access. A forensic accountant who traced their debts and showed the jury exactly how desperate they'd been. By the end of the day, the case against them looked overwhelming, but the worst was yet to come. Because tomorrow, I had to testify. That night, Paul came over to help me prepare. "They're going to try to make you angry," he said. "Morrison especially. He'll imply you're vindictive, that you're punishing Maren because she didn't live up to your expectations. Let him try. Dan, I'm serious. If you lose your temper on the stand, it could undermine everything we've built." "I won't." But I wasn't sure that was true. The next morning, Rebecca Torres called me to the stand. I swore to tell the truth, then sat in the witness box. From there, I could see everything. The jury, the judge, Maren and Tyler at their tables, the packed gallery. Rebecca started with easy questions. My name, my profession, my relationship to Maren. How would you describe your relationship with your daughter before she moved in with you? Good. Not perfect, but good. We talked regularly. Saw each other for holidays. I thought we were close. When did that change? When I realized she was using my house to create fake content and planning to steal my property. Morrison objected. Assumes facts not in evidence, Your Honor. Sustained. Mr. Rourke, please stick to what you observed. Rebecca nodded. Let's talk about what you observed. When did you first become suspicious? When my neighbor told me she'd been seeing Maren carry babies every night. I knew Maren didn't have children. What did you do? I investigated. I found fake babies and camera equipment in my spare room. I heard recordings of baby sounds being played, and I overheard Maren and Tyler talking about their plans. What plans? To forge my signature and take my house. Rebecca entered the audio recordings into evidence. The jury listened to Maren and Tyler's voices talking about forged signatures, about getting me out of the house, about how stupid I was. I watched Maren's face as the recordings played. She was crying silently, her head down. Mr. Rourke, how did it feel to hear your daughter say those things about you? Morrison objected again. Relevance, Your Honor. I'll allow it, and the witness may answer. I looked at Maren. It felt like being stabbed by someone I loved and trusted completely. Rebecca asked me more questions about the fake content, the online lies, the way they'd invaded my home and privacy. I answered each one carefully, keeping my voice steady. Then it was Morrison's turn for cross-examination. He stood up, buttoning his jacket, and approached the witness box with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Rourke, you love your daughter, don't you? I used to. But you don't anymore? Not after what she did? Isn't it true that you've always been disappointed in Maren? That she dropped out of college? That she didn't live up to your expectations? That's not true. You never expressed disappointment when she quit school? I was concerned about her future, but I supported her choice. Did you ever tell her she was wasting her potential? Maybe, I don't remember specifically. And when she married Tyler, you disapproved of that too, didn't you? I had reservations. Because Tyler didn't have a real job like you. Isn't that what you said? I took a breath. I was concerned about their financial stability. Ah, so you've been judging your daughter and her husband for years. And when they asked to stay with you, you saw it as confirmation of their failure, didn't you? No, I saw it as an opportunity to help family. Morrison pulled out a paper. Is this your social media post from 6 months ago, Mr. Rourke? Rebecca stood up. Objection, foundation. I'll establish it. Mr. Rourke, do you have a Facebook account? Yes. And did you post on that account 6 months ago, quote, some people need to learn that real work means more than posing for pictures? I remembered that post. I'd made it after seeing Tyler spend an entire Sunday afternoon taking gym selfies instead of helping me fix my deck. I may have posted something like that. And that was directed at Tyler, wasn't it? It was a general observation. A general observation made the same day Tyler turned down your request to help with home repairs because he had to maintain his brand. Isn't that right? I didn't answer immediately. Morrison smiled. Mr. Rourke, isn't it true that you've been waiting for an excuse to punish your daughter and her husband? That you resented having them in your home, and when you found out about their content creation, you saw an opportunity to get rid of them permanently? That's not true. Then why did you install hidden cameras instead of just asking Maren what she was doing? Because I knew she'd lie. Or because you wanted evidence to destroy her with? I wanted evidence to protect myself. By sending your daughter to prison? By stopping her from stealing my house. I realized I'd raised my voice. Morrison looked satisfied. Several jurors looked uncomfortable. No further questions, Morrison said, returning to his seat. Rebecca stood up for redirect. Mr. Rourke, did you or did you not hear recordings of the defendants planning to forge your signature? I did. Did you or did you not catch them attempting to file those forged documents? I did. Was there any misunderstanding, any ambiguity about their intent? No. They were going to steal my house. They said so explicitly, multiple times. Thank you, nothing further. I was dismissed from the stand. As I walked back to my seat, I had to pass by Maren's table. She reached out as I walked by, trying to touch my arm. I pulled away and kept walking. The prosecution rested their case that afternoon. The defense would start presenting their case tomorrow. Paul walked me out of the courthouse. "You did good up there." "I lost my temper." "A little, but it was understandable. The jury saw Morrison pushing you." "Did I hurt our case?" "No. If anything, you helped it. You showed emotion, made it clear this isn't just about property, it's about a father being betrayed by his daughter." "Is that what it's about?" Paul stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "I don't know anymore. Is this justice, or is it just revenge dressed up in legal clothes? Does it matter?" "Maybe." "Dan, listen to me. What they did was wrong, criminal. Whether you're getting justice or revenge or both, they need to face consequences. Otherwise, they'll just do it to someone else." I nodded, but I felt hollow inside. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept replaying the trial in my head. Maren's opening statement, my testimony, the way she'd tried to touch me in the courtroom, and I thought about what Morrison had said. Had I been waiting for an excuse to punish them? Was this really about protecting myself, or was it about something darker? I got out of bed and went to my workshop. Started working on a project, something to keep my hands busy. But even there, surrounded by my tools and my work, I couldn't escape the question that kept circling in my mind. What happens when you win a war but lose yourself in the process? I didn't have an answer, and I wasn't sure I wanted one. The defense started their case the next morning. Morrison called Tyler to the stand first. Tyler had been coached well. He looked remorseful, spoke carefully, and took responsibility for everything while somehow making it sound like a series of innocent mistakes rather than calculated fraud. "I never intended to hurt Dan," Tyler testified. "I thought we were helping him, actually. Keeping the house active, paying some bills. When we started the content creation, it seemed harmless, just using empty rooms." "And the forged documents?" Morrison asked. I'm not proud of it, but we were drowning in debt. I convinced myself we were just refinancing, that Dan would benefit from the improvements we'd make. I know now that was wrong. I know I should have talked to him first." "Did you ever intend to force Mr. Rourke from his home?" "Never. He's family. The plan was always to take care of him." Rebecca Torres destroyed him on cross-examination. "Mr. Grant, you testified that you thought you were helping Mr. Rourke. Is that correct?" "Yes." "By forging his signature?" No, that was wrong." "By planning to refinance his house without his knowledge?" "We should have asked." "By creating content that portrayed his home as yours?" "That was a misunderstanding." "By discussing how to remove him if he caused problems?" Rebecca played that audio recording, Tyler's voice, clear and confident. "If he causes problems, we evict him." "Still think you were helping him, Mr. Grant?" Tyler had no answer. The defense then called several character witnesses. Tyler's parents testified about what a good son he was. A friend from his gym talked about Tyler's generosity and kindness. A former business partner said Tyler was honest and trustworthy, but none of it could overcome the recordings, the evidence, the forged signatures. Then Maren took the stand. She'd insisted on testifying, despite her lawyer's advice. As she walked to the witness box, I saw how thin she'd gotten, how defeated she looked. Morrison handled her direct examination gently. "Maren, can you tell the jury about your relationship with your father?" He was everything to me. Growing up, it was just us after Mom left. He worked so hard to give me a good life. I've always loved him." "What happened to that relationship?" "I destroyed it. I made terrible choices, and I destroyed it." Several jurors looked sympathetic. I felt sick. "Tell us about the content creation. Why did you start that?" "I was struggling with infertility, seeing other people with babies, knowing I might never have that. It hurt. So I created this fantasy online, a life where I had everything I wanted, and people responded to it. For the first time in years, I felt successful at something." "And the decision to refinance your father's house?" "That was Tyler's idea initially, but I went along with it. We were so desperate. I convinced myself it wasn't really stealing because we'd make the payments, because Dad would benefit. But I knew, deep down, that it was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it." "Why not?" Maren's voice broke. "Because then I'd have to admit what I'd become, what I was capable of, and I couldn't face that." Morrison asked a few more questions, then sat down. Rebecca Torres stood up for cross-examination. "Ms. Rourke, you testified that you love your father. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Do you love him now?" "Yes. I'll always love him." "Even though you tried to steal his house?" Yes. I know that sounds impossible, but yes." "Let me play something for you." Rebecca played one of the audio recordings. Maren's voice. "He's too stupid to figure it out." "That's you, isn't it?" "Yes. Talking about your father, the man you claim to love." "I said that. I'm not proud of it. What about this? Rebecca played another clip, Maren laughing as Tyler joked about putting me in a home. You're laughing. You think it's funny to institutionalize your father? It was just a joke. I didn't mean. Let's talk about what you did mean. You created an elaborate online persona built on lies. You used your father's home without permission. You allowed your husband to forge your father's signature. You planned to steal his house and remove him if he resisted. And you did all of this while living under his roof, eating his food, using his utilities. Yes. That's not love, Miss Rourke. That's exploitation. I know. The simple admission seemed to take the wind out of Rebecca's sails. She paused, then tried another angle. If you really love your father, why didn't you just ask for help? Why not explain your financial situation and work something out together? Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want him to know how badly I'd failed. Because it was easier to lie than to face the truth. Easier for you. Yes, easier for me. Rebecca asked several more questions, but Maren's simple, direct answers diffused most of them. She wasn't trying to make excuses. She was just admitting everything. It was almost worse than if she'd fought back. After Maren testified, the defense rested. Closing arguments would be tomorrow. That night, Paul came over to debrief. Maren's testimony was effective, he admitted. The jury feels for her. But the evidence is still overwhelming. The recordings, the forged documents, all of it points to guilt. She admitted everything. She did. That's smart, actually. Taking responsibility, showing remorse. It won't get her off, but it might reduce her sentence. How much time are they looking at? Tyler could get 2 to 5 years. Maren, because she took responsibility, maybe 18 months to 3 years. Plus restitution, probation, all that. 3 years. My daughter would spend 3 years in prison because of what she'd done, because of what I'd done to stop her. You okay? Paul asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to see her punished, but part of you remembers when she was your little girl. Yeah, that's normal, Dan. She's still your daughter, no matter what she did. You're allowed to have complicated feelings about this. It doesn't feel complicated. It just feels awful. Paul stayed for a while longer, then left. I sat in my living room, staring at the wall where Maren used to have her school photos hung. I'd taken them down after she moved out, but I could still see the faint outlines where the frames had been. I thought about calling her, visiting her, saying something, anything that might make this hurt less. But I didn't, because there was nothing to say that would change what had happened. She'd betrayed me, I'd caught her, and now the law would decide her fate. The next morning, Rebecca Torres delivered her closing argument. She was powerful, summarizing all the evidence, reminding the jury of every lie, every betrayal, every calculated step of the conspiracy. The defendants want you to feel sorry for them, she said. They want you to see them as victims of circumstance, people who made mistakes under pressure, but the evidence shows something very different. It shows 2 people who deliberately, systematically planned to steal from Daniel Rourke. They didn't make mistakes. They made choices, criminal choices, and those choices have consequences. Then Morrison gave his closing argument for Tyler. He focused on Tyler's youth, his desperation, the pressure he'd been under. He painted Tyler as someone who'd lost his way, but who deserved a second chance. My client made terrible decisions. He knows that, he accepts that, but he's not a career criminal. He's not a predator. He's a young man who got in over his head and panicked. The law allows for mercy, for understanding that people can make mistakes and still deserve redemption. Finally, Maren stood up to give her own closing statement. She walked to the jury box and looked at each juror in turn. I'm not going to ask you to find me not guilty, she said. I am guilty of everything the prosecutor said. I lied, I stole, I betrayed the person who loved me most in the world. She turned to look at me. Dad, I know you're never going to forgive me. I don't blame you, but I need you to know that every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to regret what I did. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt you, because I broke your trust, because I took your love and turned it into something ugly. She turned back to the jury. I'm going to prison. I know that. I accept that. But before I go, I need to say one thing. If anyone out there is thinking about betraying someone who loves them, thinking about taking the easy way out instead of facing their problems honestly, don't. It's not worth it. Because even if you get away with it legally, you'll never get away with it in here. She pressed her hand to her chest, over her heart. You'll carry it with you forever, and it will destroy you worse than any prison sentence ever could. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Patterson addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the evidence and arguments. Now it's your job to determine whether the defendants are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Please deliberate carefully and return when you've reached a verdict. The jury filed out. We all stood as they left, then sat back down to wait. Could be hours, Paul said. Could be days. No way to know. But it wasn't hours or days. It was 45 minutes. When the bailiff came back and announced the jury had reached a verdict, everyone in the courtroom looked shocked. A quick verdict usually meant guilt, but this was remarkably quick. The jury filed back in. None of them looked at Maren or Tyler. That was another bad sign for the defense. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Patterson asked. The foreman, a middle-aged woman who worked as a teacher, stood up. We have, Your Honor. In the case of the state versus Tyler Grant, on the charge of identity theft, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of forgery? Guilty. On the charge of attempted fraud? Guilty. Tyler's face went pale. His mother started crying. In the case of the state versus Maren Rourke, on the charge of identity theft, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of forgery? Guilty. On the charge of attempted fraud? Guilty. Maren didn't react. She just stood there, her face blank, as the verdicts were read. Judge Patterson thanked the jury and dismissed them. Then he turned to Maren and Tyler. Sentencing will be scheduled for 4 weeks from today. Until then, Ms. Rourke will remain in custody. Mr. Grant's bail is revoked. Bailiff, please take them into custody. The bailiffs moved forward. Tyler started arguing, his lawyer trying to calm him down, but Maren just held out her hands for the cuffs. Before they led her away, she looked at me one more time. I'm sorry, Dad, she said. I didn't respond, just watched as they took her away. Paul put his hand on my shoulder. It's over, Dan. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I pushed through them without comment, got in my truck, and drove home. The house was empty when I got there. Silent, clean, mine again, completely. I walked through the rooms, looking at everything with fresh eyes. The spare room where they'd set up their studio, the kitchen where they'd plotted against me, the living room where they'd hosted their friends and laughed about how stupid I was. It all looked different now, smaller somehow, like the betrayal had shrunk the space, made it less than it had been. I went to my workshop and sat at my workbench, just breathing. 4 weeks until sentencing. 4 weeks to decide if I wanted to ask for leniency or push for maximum punishment. 4 weeks to figure out if winning this war was worth what it had cost me. I didn't have an answer yet, but I had a feeling I'd have to find one soon.